Well, did everybody enjoy their lunch? Okay, you have to wake up now because sometimes it's hard to stay connected after you've eaten. But you definitely want to dial in for these last two sessions for the afternoon. And so I wanted to introduce you to a beautiful person that I had the opportunity of getting to know several years ago. Blair and her family moved to Elizabeth City. Her husband, Byron's in the Coast Guard. And one of the things that stood out to me most about Blair, as I got a chance to get to know her, is that her smile lights up a room. I just sensed that. And then they were able to go with us to Ecuador, and which was a wonderful experience for us. But she works in an industry that can be very difficult for women, but she has challenged it and managed it in the way she is inspiring ladies to change lives. And so you are going to be totally impacted today. Take out your note pages so you can take notes about all of this gold that she's going to give you. And I want you to please make a big welcome for Blair Proffit.
Well, hello. This is, I don't know, I guess full circle would be a good term, because when I think about Forest Park and Adore and being part of this and Lana and Scott and just this whole family and community here in Elizabeth City, it's such a special place for us. It'll hold a special place in my heart forever. Like she mentioned, my husband was the Coast Guard. And when we moved here, gosh, I can't remember. I had just had a baby, so at that time it was all a blur. It was my second baby. My oldest two are only 17 months apart, so I had a 1-year-old and an infant when I moved here, and that was like the summer of 2014. And we lived here for 6 years, and I feel like it's where my husband and I kind of became parents, kind of created our own family unit, dynamic. The whole thing grew up a little bit, became adults, and it's just set such an amazing foundation. And a big part of that was Forest Park and getting to go to Ecuador, and for the first time ever in our marriage, getting plugged into small groups. And I remember Wednesdays, I don't even remember what we called it, Lana, but there was something where the moms could come and they would take your babies away from you for a couple hours, and we would talk, and they had coffee, and it was lovely. And then my kids would nap on the way home. It was a godsend, and so I'd come every Wednesday for that purpose. But it was really good. And so this Adore is just amazing. I was set up with my business and all the things, vendor forever. And so all that to say, it's just an honor to be here. And, you've obviously heard from amazing women already. And so mainly I'm talking to women. I know there's a few guys in here, but today I'm going to speak in female terms, if you get my drift. Because there are so many people in our lives that impact us, right? Men, women, all the things. And there's so many, women that you're sitting here today, and there's some people have had incredible impacts on your life. Maybe they were your mom, your sister, grandmothers, aunts. They could also be your neighbor, your friend, mentors, therapists, all sorts of things. Because women connecting with other women is such a powerful thing. And, for example, Marianne was one of those women for me. When we went to Ecuador, you want to talk about somebody's smile who could light up a room, hers did. And she was someone I was just immediately drawn to. And it's just amazing. When you meet women like that in your life, it sticks with you. You know what I mean? There's just certain people in your life that it's just, even if it was a short period of time, their impact is eternal, right? Well, for me, I've been very fortunate. I have a wonderful, supportive mom. I have incredible sisters that are my best friends and all those things. But what I'm going to talk to you guys about today are two very special women, and they are my grandmothers. I think I have some pictures. I don't know if you guys could show them. Okay. So why I'm talking about these two women is because their impact in my life is eternal. And they weren't out in front on the stage or do anything like that. But these are the last two pictures. I'm going to try not to cry. But these are the last two pictures that I had with my grandmothers because the blonde one right there, my mama's was named Joe, and she passed away when I was 21. And Rose, the one between my husband and I, she passed away when I was 26, right before my wedding. So neither one were ever able, to go to my wedding. They didn't get to meet any of my children. And sometimes, you guys, I'll forget that they aren't here. You know what I mean? When people have such a special bond, special relationship, even if they're gone, sometimes you'll have these moments in time where you kind of forget that they're gone. Like something exciting will happen in life, like, maybe latest accomplishment, maybe latest heartbreak, whatever it is. And I just want to pick up the phone and call my grandma. Either one, whichever one to answer. And I can't do that, right? Because they were at everything. They were at all the games, they were at all the performances, all the awards, all the dances, all the things that they could possibly attend. They cried with me, they laughed with me, they did life with me. And it didn't take losing these amazing women to know how blessed I was. In fact, when I was in elementary school, I used to go and brag, like, my grandma's cooler than your grandma. And by the way, I have 2 of them, and they're both awesome. You know what I mean? Like, that was like something I was very proud of. They were my best friends. I don't even know why I'm telling you this story, but my husband and I started dating at a very young age. We broke up a lot. We did all the things. But technically, I was 13 and he was 14. We started dating. Crazy, right? But my mama has always said, well, you got married and divorced multiple times before you ever decided to actually get married, so you guys should make it, right? But one of the very first dates where, your parents drop you off at the movies because you don't have a license yet, and we were going, my mama was in town because she lived 2 hours away, and so I wanted her to come meet him or whatever. And she was so nervous for me because she was so excited because she's like, he's so cute, and he was playing basketball and blah, blah, blah. So she wanted to come support me. And I was like, all right, you just don't let him see you. I'll let you walk in, but don't let him see you because that would be embarrassing, right? And so she's like walking up, and there's like those roped off things, in the movies. And she gets so nervous, she trips over the rope and knocks down like 3 rows. And then all the 8th graders and 9th graders turn around, and I was like, yeah, she's with me. That's my girl. So that was her. She's crazy. But these 2 women, by the way, were not the same because Rose, the brunette, would never have behaved in such a manner. She was way too proper for that. In fact, I would go so far as to say they were the total opposite of each other, including the influence on my life. They influenced me very differently. My Joe, you would describe as, tender, sensitive, kind. She's blonde because as soon as she got 1 gray hair, she decided she was going to be blonde for the rest of her life. She was, a worrier. Oh, my word, did that woman worry. She was the most lovable, friendly, Jesus-loving woman you've ever met. She'd be so embarrassing. Like if she went to the TJ Maxx, she's going to tell the cashier about Jesus, just in case that woman doesn't know. She was spunky. She was athletic. In fact, 1 year on vacation, you guys ever been on one of those slides where you have to cross your arms and shoot straight down? Terrifying, right? I don't know. I hate heights. Absolutely terrifies me. My brother, also terrified of heights. And I think Ben, my brother, was in high school at the time. I was in middle school, which is when you really care about what people think. And you think you know everything, but you don't. And we go to this water park, I don't know why, with my grandmother. And she's in her 70s at this time. She gets up there and she's like, oh, we're doing this. And I was like, oh, are we? And so she gets up there, crosses her arms, and shoots down the thing. And then my brother and I look at each other, and we're like, well, I guess if your grandma goes, you got to go, So that was her. She would jump off the diving board, all these things. And so she kept life fun. She loved to shop, obsessed with shoes. I get that obsession, honestly. I get it from her. I used to wait for my grandma to give me her shoes because they were cool, y'all. She was hip, okay? So at her funeral, was obviously a really difficult day. I was a senior in college at the time, and long story short, she had moved away from the home church that she was at for so long with my mom growing up and uncle and all that stuff after my grandfather passed away, but she had advocated big time for this prayer room in this church, this cute little church in Tryon, North Carolina, and she had not been a member of that church in almost a decade at that time. But she, we knew she would want to have her funeral there and the family and the whole thing. long story short, before the funeral started, I was like, because I was going to speak at the funeral, I was like, I want to go up to her prayer room and I'm going to pray so I can get the words together. And there's this little box in that prayer room, and I opened it up, and there were just handwritten prayers over and over again. And every single one of them were my grandmother's handwritten prayers. Nobody had touched them in 10 years. They were still there. And I just did not think it was a mistake that I found them on that day at her funeral. And so, of course, I ran to the pastor, and I was like, I'm taking this, right? This is going on with me. And so I still have it, but I thought, gosh, that was her. Oh, my gosh, that was her. She was a prayer warrior. She was spunky. She was amazing. So Rose, the opposite, she was a nurse, even though she smoked like a freight train. She sometimes would let a curse word slip here and there, but then apologize. And at the same time, she was a very proper Southern lady. She was very traditional. She was the best cook. I don't care what anybody says. I know everybody thinks their grandma can cook. She was better, I promise. Like in college even, I would bring, college friends over, and they're like, you weren't kidding. This is really the best thing I've eaten. I'm like, I told you. It is that good. She could sew anything. She could make anything. Every holiday looked like a Pinterest board, and Pinterest didn't even exist in her lifetime. It was all from her brain. She was talented. She played the organ at her church, which is funny. And ironically, this past Sunday, they dedicated the organ to, they had gotten a new organ, which she had complained about forever because she said it was out of tune. And they waited 20 years basically later to get one. So they had to dedicate it to her. And there were all these funny stories, and it was basically her fussing at people. Like when they get up there and somebody would sing off cue, and they'd be like, yeah, Rose would stop and tell me I'd have to go back and fix it. Like, that is her. That would be her. But, man, she was blunt. She was hilarious. She was not a hugger, for one. But one of her sisters one time told me, she's like, I've never seen Rose be affectionate until she had grandchildren. Like, I don't even think she talked to my grandpa. I don't think she cared anything about what that man did. But she loved her grandkids, and she would be all over us. So, and apparently we're the ones that could draw that out in her. But a funny example of her, I had just gotten engaged, and she was in hospice at the time, and we knew she didn't have that much longer, and so I wanted to rush and go show her my ring. I wanted her to see it. And so I was so excited, and I looked a little disheveled, and she could barely speak, and I leaned down, and I was talking to her, and I was telling her I was gotten engaged and showing her all this stuff, and she looked at me, and I didn't think about it, but I had gold earrings and a silver necklace, because I just hadn't really thought about what I looked like. And literally, my mama looked up at me, and she pointed at my earrings, and she pointed at my necklace, and she went, like, those do not match. If I'm going to send you one last message, I need your jewelry to match. So that is who these women were, in a sense, okay? Complete opposite, but my best friends. I loved them. And it's funny because both of these women love fashion. One created it, one worked in it, and so it was time closer to figure out a major and what I was going to do in my life. I decided I want to do what my grandmas would be proud of. I want to do something that they would get excited about. Because a lot of times that's what we do in life, is we make decisions on other people, right? And I like it. Shoot, I'll shop for a living, right? So they both were able to attend my senior fashion show and all that stuff, and it was a special memory and all of that. But I'm no longer in fashion today, but it definitely set a foundation for my future. Because what I realized is if I didn't have to like and do the same things they did, but the impact they have on my life and what I still learned from these two incredible women is that they each found their calling. And they each were living a life that highlighted their God-given spiritual gifts and their God-given talents. And it made me want to be like them, but in the reality, I needed to figure out what mine were. And so, and also in that regard, they both loved Jesus, but they loved him differently. They both loved their families, but they loved differently. They both loved their friends, but they loved differently. And so my two daughters today, I have 3 children, son's in the middle, but my oldest is named Landry Joe after my blonde grandmother, which was not a natural blonde. And then Colby Rose is named after my mama. And so I think God knew it was kind of confirmation for me that I can still have and will be able to share the impact that these women had on my life through my children as well. So in the last 18 months, basically, since the day we were supposed to have this conference, originally, we've all been experiencing something that I think none of us were anticipating. Am I right? And we've kind of had to adjust. We've had to absorb. We've had to endure a whole lot of change. And we were even talking about exchange. I was like, it wasn't change that was really welcomed. I wasn't really looking for it, if you get my drift. And I've thought about my grandmothers a lot. Like, what the heck would they have thought about this? You know? How would they have handled it? And what's funny is I don't think they would have been on the same page at all. They didn't even vote the same. You know, they would have handled it differently. It's funny because I can tell you that there have been moments where I've kind of lost my focus a little bit in the last year and a half. I feel like I've lost my purpose even. There's moments. And I've been so distracted with everything that's happened and all the things that have been going on that I forgot to continue on in what I feel like God's calling is in my life. Because we get so busy with life, right? We get so busy with the task that we kind of don't remember our purpose. And there's a big difference when you're living with a purposeful mindset and one where you're just kind of getting by, right? Because it's hard to find a purpose when things feel hard. It's hard to find a purpose when there's change. It's hard to find a purpose when you're really stinking busy, right? Because you get so busy. And purposeful actually means having or showing determination. So I had to ask myself, why am I here? Why am I here? Why are you here? Right? Because anyone wrestling with the question of their purpose, like maybe what has God called you to do? You know, I was in this exact same place 10 years ago at this exact same time. No lie. My husband had just started in the Coast Guard. We moved away from the comfort of our friends and family. We lived in New Orleans, Louisiana at the time. And I had been working in fashion, and there was just something in my gut, something in my spirit that was just like, you got to do something different. This isn't it. This isn't it. And I was approached with an opportunity that made me feel very uncomfortable, and I was like, hard no. But it just kept coming back to me and coming back to me and coming back to me. And there was just something that I felt like this weird sense of peace that I was supposed to go in this direction. And I was saying, you just know, right? You just know. Even though you don't want to know, you just know, right? So you're like, okay, God, I don't know what you're doing, but for some reason, you're leading me in this direction, and I'm going to trust you. And so at that moment, I stepped on faith. I did a big career change. And what's interesting to me, and what I'm so good at telling my children, but I forget to tell myself a lot, is God made you special, right? He gave you that personality. He gave you those talents. He gave you those gifts. He gave you those struggles that you've experienced. He gave you this family with this background. We're all different. We all have different things going on. But God created you for a specific purpose. And He has gifted you with something specific, right? He has a purpose for your life. We get so much into a trap of trying to fulfill our mom's purpose or our dad's purpose or our company's purpose or just what looks cool over here, right? This is what social media is doing, so I'm going to follow this outlet. And we make all these decisions based on what other people think. And so I realized you have to get a sober look at yourself and say, okay, this is the thing that I'm good at. This is maybe something I'm not so good at, right? This is something I need help with. This is something I can help someone else with. And honestly, sit back and ask yourself these questions and stop just going through the motions. Stop just being busy with life. And when you do that, you guys, it's revolutionary. It really is. It's revolutionary because I was so concerned and had been so concerned with what other people felt like I should be doing in life, what kind of fit in the mold, fit in the box, because that's just what we do, right? But I realized when God has his hand on your life, it really doesn't matter who has your name in their mouth. Does that make sense? So why am I concerned with what someone else thinks, really, when they don't know what God's called me to do? They don't know the tugs that I'm feeling. So it's fair to say in the past year, I've been shaken a little bit. And I bet I'm not the only one, right? And maybe some of this has brought up a lot of questions, like, do you feel like maybe your purpose has been put on hold? Some of you maybe feel like your purpose has been lost a little bit. Was your life, built around what you did, or was it built around the people you were around? I am a people person. I do not thrive if I'm not in front of people. I do not like Zoom. Can I get an amen? I don't know. I want to be in a room with people. I want to see their smiles. I want to see their emotions. Like, I want to be with people. And all of a sudden, so many of these things were taken away. And I had to sit back and be like, oh my gosh, what the heck is the point of all of this? But most of us deal with the same issue. When change happens and things happen, our issue is perspective, right? Perspective. And I started thinking about the story of Joseph. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible, and I think there's a reason majority of Genesis talks about this story. And if you're not familiar, that's where you can find it in the Bible, by the way. But he refused to let, all these hard circumstances consume him. His perspective was bigger than his setbacks. And Joseph was able to look at it all and say, okay, he's a sovereign God, and there is a reason that I am in this place at this time. And I don't know if this is going to work out. I don't know how it's going to work out. But if I don't bail, he will work this out for my good. Wow, right? I mean, I have certainly not experienced anything in the vicinity of what Joseph experienced. And he refused to be bitter. He refused to not forgive. He refused to become a victim. He trusted God because he had the right perspective. He said to his brothers, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. Because God has a game plan, you guys, and you can have a Joseph story. Because what's amazing to me in the Bible is the gospel is full of scripture. It's constantly saying you are full of purpose, constantly. And we are created in the image of God. We have been intentionally and carefully designed. There is a point to it all. And there is a point to your life. First things first, I had to realize you were made on purpose. Second, you were made for a purpose. We were fearfully and wonderfully made. So, what is God's calling in your life? So when I think about like my grandmothers who passed away, in their 80s, I think about how they're both able to look on their lives with honestly a lot of joy, a lot of contentment. They both experienced a lot of hard things. They experienced a lot of loss. Both my grandfathers fought in World War II. They experienced regret and pain and all the things because they experienced a whole lot of life. But they also experienced a whole lot of love, lots of good moments, joyful moments. And at the end of our lives, what we reflect on are those good moments, not those hard days. And it hit me. Am I allowing these current circumstances, my current view of this world, distract me from my purpose, distract me from all these good moments? Because you can still find good moments in the hard. Am I living or am I frozen in, the possibility of what the future holds, the possibility of what could be? So I want you guys to ask yourself, are you living? Because newsflash, you are still here. And you are still here for a purpose. Because when God placed a calling in your life, don't worry, he already factored in all your stupidity. That's something that I realized. Like, he already knew that I was going to get it wrong sometimes. But that doesn't take away the purpose. So let that give you some comfort. So you don't have to worry about losing your purpose. All you need to do is seek after God, and your purpose kind of tends to find you, right? Because what none of us want is when it comes to the end of our life, and we don't want to look back with regret, right? that maybe we stopped living. When all this chaos and all these things happened, we just felt frozen and we just kind of stopped. And we let the heart consume us and distract us from all the good things. And Matthew 11:28 through 30, I think I have that verse on a slide. There we go. It says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take up my yoke and learn from me, because I am lovely and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Jesus addresses his words to those who are weary and burdened. Anybody else feel weary and burdened since March of 2020? We felt it before, but this was just in addition to whatever else we were already experiencing, right? This means for all of us. He invites those who are tired, who are frustrated, who are bogged down by the throes of life into security with him. When anxiety invades our hearts and minds and we feel exhausted, Matthew 11 offers us hope through the presence of Jesus Christ in our lives. These are just a few brief verses that remind us of what we can and should run to when we feel exhausted, right? So this is literally a prescription. I love that. It's literally a prescription from God to aid us, to remedy our heaviest thoughts and our fears. And Jesus himself is telling us that we can simply just rest in him. I think that's such a beautiful and gracious promise, and one that I've had to constantly remind myself of. I'm like, I can just rest in him. I can't control this, but he's got it. So what kind of life did God promise us? Well, I figured it out. Not an easy one. But a powerful, world-changing, redemptive, miraculous, that overcomes hardships, that defies the odds, that defeats the giants, and that conquers the fears. Every single one of us can do that. And if we take God at his word, he can take us places. He can work through us in ways that will cause us, or will cause others, really, to say, oh my gosh, what the heck happened here? They can shake their heads and say, there has to be a God in heaven, because there is no way that they could have done those things or accomplished those things or become that person on their own. There's got to be a God, right? And you can search the scriptures yourself, and you're going to see verse after verse after verse that speaks to your calling, our purpose, and God's faithfulness to his promises. Perhaps the most compelling verse for me is Ephesians 2:10. And this says, "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the things he had planned for us long ago." Like, do you guys actually believe that God has a beautiful assignment just for you? Like, I dare you to dream with God. I dare you to do it. Because you don't need to look around at other women and long for their lives or long for their calling, because that's what I have such a tendency to do, is look at somebody else and be like, theirs looks cooler than mine. Theirs looks a little bit easier than mine. I mean, social media does a great job fooling us, right? So don't let your fears captivate you. Don't let the comparison captivate you, because no one and nothing can deter you from your calling. Not obstacles, not the women on social media that you're constantly comparing yourself, not your past sins, not your past mistakes. Only unbelief can keep you down and living a life chained to being mediocre, maybe living less than what you're potentially capable of. And something I realized too is, do you guys realize that Satan sees our potential way clearer than we do? He sees what we're capable of so much clearer than we see it. That's why he works overtime to keep us from seeing who we really are. And I can tell you the greatest thing that my grandmothers ever did for me was tell me that I was special, was telling me that I had gifts, that I was capable, that God had big plans for me. And not everybody has those people in their life. That's why Adore is so special. That's why the community at Forest Park is so special, because everyone needs somebody in their life telling you, you have gifts, you are capable, and God has big plans for you. I've always felt like I could do all these things, and that confidence came from these Christ-centered relationships that I had in my life. And aren't we so good at seeing someone else's calling? We're so much better at that, right? We're so much better at encouraging someone else than seeing it in ourselves. Something I realized is that you don't really have to be in the spotlight to matter, right? You don't have to be on the mission field. You don't have to be a missionary. Because you guys, for a long time, I thought because I wasn't in ministry, maybe I wasn't really living out my calling, because I wasn't doing some of the expectations that other people had. I wasn't living out my calling. You guys, I'm going to be honest with you. I love business. I love it. I love it. I'm passionate about it. I love the emotional roller coaster of it even. I love helping people grow a business, grow into something that they never thought they were going to be able to do, and walk away from something that maybe wasn't serving them. I love it. I'm passionate about it. It's something that excites me. And it's funny, I was in Elizabeth City a few years ago, and there was someone who came up to me, and I had never said out loud, because my brother's a lead pastor, my sister is a Christian counselor, women's minister, my other sister's a soccer coach and works in youth ministry, so they're all in ministry, and that's great, and that's wonderful, and they're amazing at it. That is their gift. That is their calling. I'm proud of them. They're incredible. But then I was like, am I supposed to be doing ministry? Because you guys ever hear the stories of people at church that it's like so-and-so couldn't pay their light bill, and then this person came up and wrote an anonymous check and gave it to them? I'm like, I want to be the check person. You know what I mean? I feel like God's calling me that way. No, joking. But I'm not going to complain if I am. But sometimes, I got so frozen in thinking, you have to be like a martyr in some ways, right? And I'm like, you can bless people with your calling and your purpose, and it might not look like someone else's. And someone came up to me, because I never said this out loud. It's just something internally that I was battling and struggling with, because I enjoyed what I was doing. I was like, am I supposed to be doing something else because of this expectation? And she came up and she was like, hey, I don't know, but for whatever reason, I just felt like the Lord was telling me to tell you that you are where you need to be, and you're not supposed to be in ministry. And I was like, what? Lord told you I'm not supposed to be in ministry? But it was so funny, because how in the world would she know? And by the way, your callings change. I don't know what my future holds, but it was something that allowed me to stop feeling frozen. And I felt like I can continue doing what I'm supposed to do. It was confirmation. Because sometimes we feel like we're going to misinterpret what God has called us, or we're going to hear it wrong. And then I have to remember, you guys, we just have to trust God with our fears, with our insecurities, with all the things. He's then going to entrust us with that call that puts all those fears to shame. Because without the people doing the business, without the people doing the other things, I joke around, I tell people all the time, I'm like, I teach people how to grow a business so they can tithe the church. That's what I like doing. That's where my gift is. I like doing the business things. But that doesn't mean it doesn't help for the good. It doesn't do the things that God's calling me to do. Ephesians 1 said, live a life worthy of the calling you have received. What are the things that keep us from doing this? Fear, right? What are some other things? Guilt, shame, rejection. Rejection's a big one for me, because I would always worry about what people thought. But guess what? God handled all that for us. And, when you think about that story of Peter walking out on a boat, I think it's in Matthew. I think the story's in Matthew. Anyways, doesn't matter. Basically, God's saying, trust me, take heart, engage your faith. He controls the storms. He's called us to these moments to see his glory and grow our faith. Because think about being Peter on that boat, right? And Peter yells out, just paraphrasing here, Jesus, is that really you? Because all the disciples are over there telling him it's a ghost, right? And can you imagine if it really was a ghost? What? Think about it. How bizarre would it be you see a shadow, you can't tell who it is, and the disciples are saying, that's a ghost out there floating on the water. Like, you cannot get out of this boat in this storm and walk over to him. Are you crazy? But Peter knew God's voice. And even more profound, Peter had asked God to be called. He said, call me, Lord. I want to walk with you to the unknown places. Wherever you are, I want to walk with you. Through danger and storm and by still waters, I'll walk forward if you ask me. I'm going to take the necessary risk required of me because I know you're with me. You know, Peter basically understood Christ's authority. He knew Jesus was calling him out, and he knew Jesus would hold him up. There's a quote from a book called Your Beautiful Purpose that I might think we have a slide, just so you guys can see it. There we go. And it says, life is too precious to simply live in reaction to our busy schedules or to our binding fears. We have to work to do that will change us, fulfill us, stretch and beautify us, and through us, by the power of the Holy Spirit mightily at work within us, this work will change the world. You and I have a calling in our lives. Scripture is clear. May God give you a strong sense of your kingdom call so you can begin making life choices that line up with your divine and appointed purpose and direction. I love this book. It's called A Beautiful Purpose, and I remember reading it the summer that we moved here, sitting on the beach, and that just shook me. It's one of those quotes, I have it written in my office, I have it written in notebooks to just constantly remind me of the appointed purpose and direction in my life. Because there's going to be whole seasons of life, you know, where you're spent serving in ways that don't really seem to line up with your gifts and with your passions. There's seasons in life that you're going to feel overlooked. You're going to feel completely missed. Seasons of storms that life just seems to knock you completely off course. And we can know that he has for us a time and a place and a very distinct purpose, and we just simply have to trust him. And Peter could look at that and see two options. You know, he saw his way, which, you know, kind of threatened all total and complete disaster. And he saw Jesus' way, which kind of defied all laws of gravity. And the human in us is naturally going to say, I do not want to sink to the bottom of the ocean, right? I do not want to step out on faith. But you guys, how many times would we do the same thing? We can only see what seems logical, which usually leads us to being frozen, right, and doing nothing at all. Or we can remember that Jesus stands on the water, and he's calling us away from these self-made decisions, from these fears and these doubts and insecurities and all these things, calling us to his way. And at some point, we have to recognize and just kind of shut down what the world's telling us, what our mind's telling us, what our insecurities are telling us, and decide just to trust him, to step out on faith and start walking. And if you're sitting there right now and, you know, you kind of feel like you have like a buried dream in your heart, I pray that you can see and know that God is at work in you and through you. And regardless, if yours is a calling where it seems to be more of like a hidden significance, like kind of behind the scenes, or it's one of public influence, we all want to have a beautiful life and we want to finish out strong. My grandmothers were not in a public influence, but they still had such significant impact in this world. I will run into people all the time and say, yes, I'm so-and-so's granddaughter, and story after story after story of the impact that these women had in people's lives. And it's just such a comforting thing for me to remind. It's like sometimes we think the littlest things are insignificant and they have an eternal impact in our world. And how often do we forget to ask God for the impossible? We tend to plant these seeds of faith only to get choked up on the weeds of worry and distractions. So I have to ask myself, you know, are you living with relentless faith? Are you frozen with unbelief? Because Peter was just like us. He needed his passions purified, Otherwise, he's going to get tripped up again and again and again and again. And so stepping out of that comfort zone almost always involves risk, right? It is scary out there. It is. But what I realized, it is so much scarier not. All the good things in life are outside of this comfort zone. And so often we get so hung up on the possibility of what it looks like out there. You guys, we're made for growth. You can only grow when you're out there. We're made for transformation. You can only transform when you're out there. We're made to help others. You can only help other people out there. And if we make life about us, if we make life about our comfort zones, we're going to miss this whole purpose of living on this earth. You're here at this time, at this point, in this season, in this hard, all the things for a reason. And it's uncomfortable. And there's so much hope, you guys, in the gospel of Jesus, because we have a Savior that meets us where we're at. It's not that we are worthy or, we're never going to be worthy, but by God's grace, we are saved. It's forgiven. It's gone. And we can live in the worthiness of our calling. Ephesians 4:1 says, I urge you to live a life worth the calling in which you've received. No matter what your circumstances are, you're still here, you are still living, and you still have a purpose. And I pray that God opens your eyes to all he's impacted you to do. I was looking at my time, and I actually have time, so I'm going to do this. Because this is one of the special things. My mom eyes, the Joe, I don't know, it might have been my mom's. It was an old frame, and there was this thing that she gave me, and I had it hung up in my room forever. It didn't match anything, but Mama's gave it to me, so I was going to hang it up in my room. And it's this quote, or a poem, I guess. It's called If for Girls. And I remember reading it, just throughout my life when I was a kid. I'd barely pay attention to it because it was always in my room on my wall. And when I was in high school is when I really started to think about these words. And it says, if for girls, if you can hear the whispering about you and never yield to deal in whispers too, if you can bravely smile when loved ones doubt you and never doubt in turn what loved ones do, if you can keep a sweet and gentle spirit in spite of fame or fortune, rank or place, and though you win your goal or only near it, can win with poise or lose with equal grace. If you can meet with unbelief believing and hallow in your heart a simple creed, if you can meet deception undeceiving and learn to look to God for all you need, if you can be what girls should be to mothers, chums in joy, and comrades in distress, and be unto others as you'd have the others be unto you, no more and yet no less. If you can keep within your heart the power to say that firm, unconquerable no, if you can brave a present shadowed hour rather than yield to build a future woe, if you can love yet not let loving master, but keep yourself within your own self's clasp, and not let dreaming lead you to disaster, nor pity's fascination lose your grasp. If you can lock your heart on confidences, nor ever needlessly in turn confide, if you can put behind all pretenses of mock humility and foolish pride, if you can keep the simple, homely virtue of walking right with God, then have no fear that anything in all the world can hurt you, and which is more, you'll be a woman, dear. You guys, I dare you to dream with God. I dare you to walk out his plan in your life. I dare you to walk out the calling, because I promise you, if you do, we will be on the other side of it saying, wow, look what he did through me. We can dare to dream because it's no small thing, and it's not for the faint of heart. But in Christ we're called and we are appointed and we are equipped to live life bigger than ourselves. And the dictionary defines the word purpose as the reason for which something is done. So, what is your purpose? To live a good life? To work hard? To be a good wife? To be a good parent? To be a good friend? Why is your purpose so important, especially in the time we're living in? Gail Hyatt once said, people lose their way when they lose their why. And this season basically in particular has brought some of this to surface for me. It's caused a lot of us to lose our way. And crisis can reveal these things that we've put like all of our hope in, right? These things that we've put our trust in that's incredibly fragile, and it's not going to sustain. And misplaced priorities, ultimately lead to these misspent lives. And that's not what any of us want. When we place our priorities in the wrong place, at the wrong time, it means we're chasing and running after those. And when we look back, we wish we had invested time here, or we wish we had spent our time doing this thing, or wish we ignored this person. And so I wish I would have done it differently. We don't want to ask ourselves that. We all want to look back on our lives and be glad that we spent it with a purpose. Because this time in our world has given us an opportunity to reset our why. That's a gift, right? So I want you guys to take that thing that you're great at, whatever it is, and use it for the glory of God and use it for the good of people. And let us take this beautiful gift called life and live out our purpose and recognize our own divine calling.